Marcus Reynolds stood motionless as two security guards dragged him through Liberty Airlines' crowded terminal. His Italian suit was wrinkled, his platinum watch askew. But it was the contract in his Honda $3 billion acquisition agreement that made the scene truly surreal. Passengers stared. Cameras flashed. A once anonymous traveler had become the center of a humiliating spectacle. Just 20 minutes earlier, Marcus had been denied his rightful seat in first class. Not because of a boarding error or overbooking, but because someone in uniform decided he didn't look the part. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know what he owned. And they certainly didn't know that in less than a month, the man they mocked would own the airline and dismantle its power from the inside out. This wasn't going to be a lawsuit. This wasn't going to be a press release. This would be a reckoning strategic, surgical, and unstoppable. Because Marcus Reynolds didn't just get mad, he bought the system. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Marcus Reynolds had endured many things in life: poverty, racism, rejection by banks and venture capitalists. But there was something particularly cruel about the calm humiliation unfolding that morning at Liberty Airlines. The boarding pass glowed on his phone screen. Seat 2A, first class, confirmed. But that didn't stop flight attendant Heather Davidson from looking him up and down like he was trespassing in a place he had no right to be. Her smile, tight and professional for the white couple ahead of him, disappeared when she saw Marcus. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" she asked, tone syrupy with suspicion. Marcus kept his composure. "Yes, first class, flight 1857 to Atlanta." He held up his phone. The seat and flight details were clear. Heather didn't even glance. "Let me get a supervisor." That's when Bradley Williams stepped in. The gate supervisor looked like every middle manager who had ever assumed Marcus was the valet, not the client. "Sir, there seems to be a problem with your ticket. Can I see your ID?" Marcus handed it over silently. Bradley inspected it with the slow scrutiny usually reserved for counterfeit bills. "How did you purchase this ticket?" he asked. "Through my company's travel system," Marcus replied. "Same as every week. And you're claiming this is your seat?" Bradley asked, like Marcus had just forged a passport. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't have to. Behind them, passengers had begun to notice. Phones were subtly raised. A woman nearby whispered to her husband. A man in a business suit smirked and turned away. Marcus knew this feeling. It was like being submerged in a slow-boiling bath. You weren't dead, but something inside you was burning. "Finally," Bradley said, "we're going to need you to step aside while we verify." Marcus stood his ground. "What irregularities are you seeing? I've flown with Liberty Airlines 32 times this year, justly first class." Bradley's tone turned quiet, but just loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Sir, we can resolve this quickly. As a courtesy, you can board with economy class." A courtesy? As if he were being granted a favor rather than denied something he had paid for. The words hit like acid. "We just can't verify the validity of your first-class ticket." Marcus glanced at the wall clock. 3 hours until his meeting in Atlanta, the one that would finalize a $3 billion acquisition. He had done this mental math before. Every black executive had. You weigh the principle against the stakes. You ask, is now the time to fight, or do I take the hit and win later? He took a breath. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll board with economy." Heather smiled. Bradley smirked. "Wonderful. Thank you for understanding." as Heather led him past the stairs and silence. Marcus felt the weight of 1,000 microaggressions reawaken in his chest. The security guard who tailed him through a jewelry store. The banker who offered him a credit card application instead of an account. The receptionist who asked if he was the delivery guy. And now this. When Marcus reached the economy cabin, he discovered his new seat last row, middle seat, next to the bathroom, was already occupied. The flight attendant shrugged. "You can take 33E instead. No apology, no eye contact, just a seat downgrade and indifference." Marcus squeezed in, knees brushing the seat in front of him, heart pounding not with anger, but calculation. He had stayed quiet, but they had just made the cost of that silence too high. As the plane lifted off, turbulence rocked the cabin slightly. A stewardess spilled lukewarm coffee onto his cuff and muttered "oops" without offering a napkin. He stared out the window, ignoring the stain, ignoring the smell. Instead, he picked up his phone and texted, "Zoe, document everything. I want Liberty Airlines' leadership structure, shareholder list, discrimination history, vendor contracts, everything." "Start now." She replied instantly, "On it. Are you okay?" Marcus didn't answer, because this wasn't about being okay. This was about making them pay not emotionally, but economically. He had tried to walk through the front door with grace. They had slammed it in his face. So now, he would buy the building. By the time the plane touched down in Atlanta, Marcus Reynolds had shifted into war mode. Not the kind with shouting or spectacle, but the kind he'd mastered across 2 decades of building Phoenix Technologies' precision, patience, and power hidden behind a calm smile. As the wheels screeched on the runway, Marcus pulled up a secure document on his encrypted cloud. It was a preliminary report from Zoe, his executive assistant and information strategist. The file was titled Liberty Airlines, Vulnerabilities and Exposure Points. It was exactly what he needed. The flight crew made the usual announcements, but Marcus wasn't listening. He was reviewing the names of Liberty's board members, their compensation packages, shareholding ratios, legal history, and most interesting of all, their silence on 287 prior discrimination complaints over the last 3 years. 287 cases. All quietly settled, he murmured. The seatbelt sign dinged off. As passengers scrambled for their overhead bags, Marcus stayed seated. He opened a private app coded by his own engineers and began drafting his first move-in internal memo to his CFO and legal counsel titled Operation Phoenix Proposed Strategic Takeover Initiation. The subject line alone was enough to startle any executive who saw it. As he exited the plane, Marcus was met by his Atlanta driver holding a sign that read, "Mr. Reynolds, VIP." The driver looked surprised when Marcus approached from economy class. "I was waiting at the first-class gate," he said awkwardly. "I got redirected," Marcus said, slipping into the back seat without another word. As they pulled away from Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, Marcus's phone vibrated. It was a direct call from Phoenix Technologies chairman, Arthur Brandt. "Marcus, are you okay? I just saw the footage. It's already gone viral. CNBC's playing it on loop. I'm aware. The board's concerned. We've worked hard to build our reputation. It's already affecting investor sentiment. I've already taken steps." Marcus replied, "Don't worry. I'm not looking for a courtroom settlement. I'm looking for something more permanent." Arthur hesitated. "What does that mean? I'll update you in 72 hours?" The call ended. Marcus arrived at Skytech's headquarters 20 minutes late for a deal that was poised to revolutionize aviation technology. Their predictive maintenance algorithms were unparalleled capable of identifying flight risks weeks before they became emergencies. This merger would make Phoenix Technologies the de facto leader in aviation software. But when he walked through the sleek glass doors, the receptionist looked up with wide eyes. "Mr. Reynolds, please go to the 34th floor. The board's waiting." Elevator mirrors reflected the wear of the day. His shirt was creased, coffee stains still visible, his tie slightly loosened. No matter. Let them misjudge him. They always did. And it always ended the same. Inside the penthouse boardroom, the temperature was 10 degrees cooler. 6 executives sat in immaculate suits, flanked by Thomas Harrison, Skytech's CEO, who greeted Marcus with a reserved nod. "We were expecting you earlier," Thomas said. "No handshake. Minor airline complications," Marcus replied. "But let's proceed. You took economy." Thomas raised an eyebrow, voice pitched just high enough for everyone to catch the subtext. "If your company is worth $5 billion, why can't you buy your CEO a proper seat?" Marcus said nothing. He let the tension hover just long enough before responding. Economy has its advantages, gives one a clearer view of what needs fixing in the industry. A few executives chuckled nervously. Thomas didn't. Instead, he slid a revised contract across the table. Marcus scanned it quickly, then slowly then again. The terms had changed. Now there was a 12% valuation increase and a more aggressive performance clause that would place Phoenix on the hook for future liabilities. "This wasn't in the original agreement," Marcus said flatly. "In light of market fluctuations and public developments, we felt an adjustment was prudent." Thomas replied, "So that was it. One act of public humiliation had made the business world circle its wagons. They smelled weakness. They wanted a better deal. They wanted blood." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Are these changes final?" Thomas gave a thin smile. "Unless something shifts significantly." In that moment, Marcus understood something crystal clear. Liberty Airlines had humiliated him, but Skytech had underestimated him, and that was going to cost them dearly. An alert buzzed on Marcus's phone. It was from Zoe. "Got what you asked for. Liberty's executive team, vendor data, shareholder breakdown, and you're not going to believe this their largest unannounced client is Skytech. Liberty accounts for 40% of their revenue." Marcus stared at the message, and then he smiled slowly. Because now the pieces aligned. This wasn't just personal, it was strategic. If Liberty Airlines was the rot, then Skytech was the nerve connected to it. And Marcus Reynolds. He had just found the pressure point. Marcus didn't flinch. As the Skytech executives waited for his response to their newly inflated terms, he slid the revised contract aside and picked up his phone, casually tapping into Zoe's encrypted document feed. There it was. Skytech's concealed relationship with Liberty Airlines. 40% of their revenue, quietly funneled through third-party aviation vendors. No wonder they were emboldened to change the acquisition terms. They assumed Liberty's leverage extended into this room. It did. Until now. Thomas leaned forward. "Is there a problem?" Mr. Reynolds. Marcus looked up, calm as ever. "Not at all. But I have a proposal." Thomas blinked. "You're countering the new valuation, no," Marcus said. "I'm suggesting a 30-minute recess so you can reconsider your terms in light of new information." He placed his phone on the table, screen facing up. The Skytech board members leaned forward, eyes narrowing as they read the headline, "Passenger Profiled. Denied First-Class Seat CEO of Phoenix Technologies Speaks Out." Under it, a still frame from airport surveillance showing Heather Davidson confronting Marcus at the Liberty check-in counter. One executive's eyes widened. "This is you. Yes? And you're not filing a lawsuit." Marcus's smile was slight, but sharp. "Not yet. But I am conducting a systemic audit of Liberty Airlines. And based on what I've discovered so far, I'd strongly advise you to revisit your numbers." The room went silent, because now they understood Marcus wasn't just here to buy software. He was here to flip the power dynamic. Thomas stiffened. "Let's take a break." The boardroom cleared. Marcus remained seated. He called Zoe. "Tell James to shift the legal angle. We're not just pursuing discrimination damages anymore. We're building a class action framework. Get statements from past complainants. And prepare a media kit. I want every news outlet briefed before morning." "You sure you want to escalate this?" Zoe asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Liberty Airlines is a decaying tree. I'm just lighting the match, downstairs in the Skytech lobby." Marcus stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching Atlanta's skyline burn amber with the late afternoon sun. His thoughts moved like code streamlined, structured, exacting. He had no interest in a messy lawsuit that would drag for years. He wanted control. Control over the very machinery that had humiliated him. Control over the airline's reputation, revenue flow, and regulatory obligations. If Liberty had thought they could buy silence with a few vouchers and an insincere apology, they were about to learn what it meant to face someone who builds systems, not just disrupts them. Thomas returned, clearly shaken. "We've reviewed our position." Marcus nodded for him to continue. "We're reinstating the original valuation. No added clauses. Full compliance with your preferred terms. And public acknowledgement of our partnership within 72 hours. Marcus added. Thomas hesitated. Marcus leaned in. "Or I include your company in the discrimination audit. And believe me, when it comes to cultural bias in vendor contracting, you don't want that spotlight." Thomas exhaled. Done. Marcus stood. Pleasure doing business. Back in his suite that night. Marcus gathered his executive team on a secure video call. Liberty's vulnerable. He began. Not just because of what they did to me, but because it's what they've always done. There's a pattern, a system, a digital signature of discrimination. James, his chief of staff, shared his screen a timeline of Liberty's settlement cases, color-coded by race, class, and location. They've paid out over $17 million in hush settlements, most under non-disclosure agreements. James explained. "Find the loopholes," Marcus ordered. "Any clause that allows disclosure for legal or ethical investigations, we need it." Alexis, Phoenix's general counsel, chimed in. "We already have 7 former passengers willing to testify, including a black neurosurgeon, a Latina federal judge, and a retired Korean military officer, all denied premium seating despite proper credentials." And internally, Marcus asked. James pulled up another document leaked emails from Liberty's training division, titled Passenger Quality Control Guidelines. The language was vague, but not vague enough. Phrases like customer compatibility, passenger image alignment, and brand fit based on visual presentation told the story. They had weaponized professional appearance into a justification for profiling. "They've gamified prejudice," Marcus said coldly, "and hid it behind software." The next morning, headlines exploded. Liberty Airlines accused of systemic discrimination. Phoenix Technologies. CEO Marcus Reynolds speaks out on viral incident. Audit uncovers discriminatory algorithms in passenger processing. Liberty responded with the expected statement. We are reviewing the matter internally and remain committed to diversity and inclusion. But Marcus wasn't waiting for committees or reviews. He had already activated Operation Phoenix. His team had begun discreetly acquiring Liberty Airlines shares through shell companies, index funds, and proxy holders. The goal wasn't litigation, it was takeover. The best revenge wasn't money, it was ownership. And the system that tried to bury him. He would dig it up, expose it to sunlight, and burn it to the ground. By dawn, Marcus Reynolds sat in his Atlanta suite surrounded by monitors. Every screen glowed with a different layer of Liberty Airlines' operational blueprint purchase data, internal memos, training manuals, and most damning of all, their passenger profiling algorithm. James stood nearby, arms crossed. We've confirmed it. Liberty's AI systems assign a probability score for boarding disruptions. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Disruptions? Based on what James tapped his tablet. Name origin, credit card type, skin tone estimation from photo verification, when available, travel frequency, clothing patterns, even how confident a passenger looks walking through security. Marcus stared at the list, each metric weighted by arbitrary formulas. They created an AI that encodes bias, packages it as efficiency, and calls it a business solution. Zoe cut in from the live feed. We cross-checked 1,000 passenger complaints over 3 years. Black passengers were flagged at 3.4 times the rate of white passengers for manual review. When challenged, Liberty claims it's random. Of course they do, Marcus muttered, because it was never about policy. It was about plausible deniability. He scrolled through Liberty's internal handbook, where the section titled Premium Passenger Discretion had been marked confidential. It advised staff to quietly divert questionable passengers from first class in order to preserve the comfort and expectations of our brand-aligned clients. Marcus clenched his jaw. Brand-aligned clients. That wasn't policy. That was whitewashed racism in corporate font. What's the current shareholder count, he asked. James responded instantly. Through our proxies and aligned investors, we control 11.3% of Liberty voting shares, and by end of week. If the acquisition timing holds, 18% with 3 major blocks ready to flip if we file the class action publicly. Good, Marcus said. Then we need a signature moment. At 10 a.m., Marcus arrived at the Liberty Airlines data center in suburban Atlanta. This time, not as a customer, but as a stakeholder. His entry had been arranged through Phoenix's quiet investment firm, disguised as a software vendor meeting. But once inside, Marcus made no pretense. I'm Marcus Reynolds, he said flatly, and I'm here to speak with your systems architect. The receptionist stammered. 2 didn't know you had an appointment. I own 11% of your company, Marcus replied. Consider this my walkthrough. Security tried to intervene, but James appeared with legal paperwork that granted Marcus temporary corporate inspection rights as an investor. The guards backed off. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the cold glow of Liberty's core server floor. He faced Eleanor Price, the senior data scientist behind Liberty's Passenger Harmony initiative, a euphemistic name for the algorithm quietly deciding who did or didn't belong in first class. I've reviewed your work, Marcus began. Fascinating logic trees, clever data modeling, curious correlations. Eleanor looked nervous. I was following executive directives. You mean Bradley Williams? Marcus asked. Her eyes widened. Marcus nodded. Yeah, the same man who flagged me for irregularities. He's a footnote now. I'm interested in your decision trees. She tried to steady her voice. The system improves efficiency by flagging anomalies. And what defines an anomaly? She hesitated. Passengers whose behavioral data doesn't align with historical profiles of our top-tier clients. Marcus crossed his arms. You mean black passengers who wear Timberlands instead of Todds, or Asians who book last-minute tickets, or Latinas who travel solo. That kind of anomaly. She said nothing. He stepped closer. You wrote the code. Did you ever stop to think who the code was hurting? Eleanor's voice broke. I raised concerns. They told me not to touch the weights. They said the algorithm was working as designed. It was, Marcus replied. If the design was institutional bias. He pulled out a folder. Inside a court order draft, a class action outline, and a request for Eleanor's expert testimony. You have a choice, Marcus said softly. Defend the indefensible or help dismantle it. She took the folder with trembling hands. I'll testify, she said quietly. But off the record first. There's something else. A subroutine one I wasn't allowed to document. It auto-reduces upgrade eligibility for flagged profiles, even if points or payment qualify. Meaning, even if a black or brown passenger earns an upgrade, the system blocks it silently. No notification. It just reassigns the seat. Marcus felt the breath leave his chest. They weren't just profiling people. They were digitally erasing their entitlements. That afternoon, Marcus met with his legal team at a confidential location. We file this discrimination suit under Title II and Title VII, Alexis said. But with the algorithmic data, we're introducing new grounds-coded discrimination in automated systems. It's unprecedented. Then we'll set precedent, Marcus said. James nodded. Class action goes live tomorrow. Investor acquisition continues through shadow funds. Liberty doesn't even know it's bleeding. And the media. Marcus asked. Zoe smirked. We've scheduled your CNBC interview right after the class action drop. Headline topic, The Hidden Algorithms of Discrimination and the CEO Fighting Back. Marcus leaned back. It had begun as a humiliating moment. But now, it was a movement. He didn't just want justice. He wanted to rewrite the code. Marcus Reynolds stood alone in his Seattle office at midnight, staring out over the Sound. Below, the lights of the tech district glowed steady calm, ordered, safe. A stark contrast to the corporate storm he was about to unleash. He turned back to his desk, where Operation Phoenix was displayed across 3 screens: proxy ownership logs, strategic timelines, and a shareholder alignment map that resembled a war room operation, which, in many ways, it was. At exactly 12:01 a.m., his legal team filed the class action lawsuit in federal court Reynolds et al. v. Liberty Airlines, alleging systemic racial discrimination in premium class access, algorithmic bias, and retaliatory conduct. It was the first lawsuit in U.S. history to challenge airline algorithm ethics on racial grounds. By 6 a.m., the filing was trending worldwide. Equal skies. Now discrimination. In the clouds. Reynolds vs. Liberty's public relations team, scrambled, but no pre-written apology or diversity commitment statement could withstand the footage now flooding every platform, Marcus being denied boarding, a Korean executive recounting her de-seating, a judge crying at a terminal after being told, "You don't look like a priority passenger," By noon, Liberty's stock had dropped 9.8%. That was the exact moment Marcus made his next move. He called Raj Patel, managing director of Clarion Equity Partners, a powerful but conservative institutional investor. "Raj," Marcus said evenly, "you've been trying to push Liberty into digital modernization for years. I just filed the leverage you've been missing." Raj chuckled. "You're serious about acquiring control. I'm serious about reform. But they won't move unless someone removes the current board. You back my voting slate, and Clarion gets 2 board seats and first-mover advantage on Liberty's IT rebuild. And if this doesn't work, I'll take full public ownership of the failure," Marcus replied. And Clarion walks away with shareholder goodwill for supporting corporate responsibility. Raj was silent for a moment. "Then send me the names. By 5 p.m. Clarion's 6. 4% stake had joined Phoenix's coalition. 24 hours later, Marcus controlled 19.3% of Liberty's voting shares enough to force board nominations for the upcoming annual meeting. That night, Liberty's leadership met in crisis mode. "This is a takeover," said General Counsel Victoria Harding. "This is blackmail," snapped Chairman Bradshaw. "He's hijacking public sympathy to force corporate power." "No," Victoria said. "He's executing a legal shareholder strategy. And frankly, he's doing it better than we are." CEO Richard Whitman slammed his hand on the table. "What's his endgame?" "A seat at the table." "A payout, no," Victoria replied grimly. "He wants the table." 2 days later, Marcus arrived at Liberty's headquarters not as a plaintiff, but as a shareholder representative. A wave of cameras followed him inside. His team flanked him: Zoe, James, Alexis, and 3 Phoenix engineers who had already reverse-engineered Liberty's passenger data flows. At reception, a security guard hesitated. "Sir, 2 don't see a meeting scheduled." "You do now," Marcus replied, handing over the court-validated access paperwork. "Investor oversight visit. Effective immediately. Upstairs." Richard Whitman watched the live security feed and muttered, "He walks like he owns the place." "Give it a week," Alexis quipped under her breath. "He just might." Marcus didn't pause for directions. He walked directly to the elevator, swiped the temporary investor badge, and hit floor 38, the executive wing. A few Liberty board members were already in the lounge. One rose, flustered. "Mr. Reynolds, this is private." "No, it's not," Marcus said. Per SEC regulations, shareholders controlling more than 10% of voting rights have observation privileges on board activities. I'm here to observe. You're here to provoke. I'm here to oversee reform. Whether you fight me or follow me is your choice." He turned to the waiting Phoenix engineers. "Download all compliance protocols tied to premium passenger classification. I want a record of every algorithmic decision made in the last 12 months. By the next morning, Marcus was on CNBC. "The issue isn't just one flight," he told the host. "It's the fact that Liberty Airlines built an invisible wall around first class. They made discrimination scalable, then called it software." The host raised an eyebrow. "And what's your end goal?" "Mr. Reynolds, I want systemic reform," Marcus said. "But let's be honest, the only thing Liberty's board listens to is ownership. So I'm giving them the one thing they understand: loss of control." When the segment ended, Marcus's inbox exploded. 2 additional investment groups, both long frustrated by Liberty's stagnation, reached out. Within 48 hours, Marcus's coalition surpassed 26% of voting shares, enough to schedule a shareholder vote to replace the board. Back at Liberty, Whitman's panic turned into aggression. Their legal team filed for an emergency injunction to block Marcus's proxy campaign. The argument: reckless activist investing. The judge denied it in 10 minutes. On a Thursday evening, as Liberty's board held a last line of defense meeting, Victoria Harding offered a final warning. Reynolds isn't staging a protest. He's executing a clean, legal, and unrelenting takeover. If you want a say in Liberty's future, start negotiating. Otherwise, pack your things. The boardroom went silent, because by now, they all knew Marcus Reynolds wasn't just coming for revenge. He was coming for the whole damn airline. The walls of Liberty Airlines' executive boardroom felt tighter than usual, constricting under pressure, under scrutiny, under fear. A week had passed since Marcus Reynolds filed the class action lawsuit and launched his proxy war. In just 7 days, Liberty's stock had dropped 18%. Internal morale plummeted. Major clients began pulling preferential partnerships. And now, nearly 30% of Liberty's shareholders supported Marcus's proposed slate for board replacement. But this wasn't a courtroom. This was corporate warfare, and Marcus was winning every move. CEO Richard Whitman paced like a general reviewing a failing map. We need countermeasures. Now. We've tried PR damage control, said Vanessa Chen, Liberty's chief communications officer. No one's buying the misunderstanding line. It's too late for spin. Whitman turned to Leonard Brooks, Liberty's legal counsel. Options. Brooks shifted uncomfortably. We're preparing a counter-lawsuit, alleging that Marcus violated confidentiality agreements and used insider tech data from Phoenix to fuel a hostile takeover. Whitman grinned. Good. Let's threaten to bury him in litigation. Victoria Harding interrupted. That will backfire. Excuse me. Marcus already has whistleblowers. If we sue, Discovery opens everything: our passenger profiling code, our internal complaints, the NDAs we've used to silence victims. All of it. He wants a war. Victoria. Whitman spat. We give him one. But Marcus Reynolds was already fighting on 3 fronts. At Phoenix Technologies' Seattle HQ, James and Zoe were coordinating real-time asset acquisition. Our shell firm just locked down another 3.2%. James reported, we're at 33.4% voting shares, with proxy commitments pushing us over 38%. Zoe grinned. Enough to legally restructure their board with or without cooperation. Marcus nodded. Then it's time to go public. He stood in front of a live stream camera, background blurred intentionally, voice calm and resolute. To every Liberty Airlines passenger who's been profiled, downgraded, or humiliated, you're not crazy. You were targeted. Click. To every employee silenced for speaking out, you're not alone. The evidence is here. Click. And to Liberty's shareholders, I offer you a future, not of scandal and lawsuits, but of transparency, accountability, and profit that doesn't depend on prejudice. Click. The video went viral within hours. The comment section exploded. I've been that passenger. Someone finally said it. Reynolds for CEO. That same night, Marcus received a text from Raj at Clarion Equity Liberty Board offering emergency meeting. Private. Confidential. Marcus texted back, I'll come, but I won't negotiate integrity. The next morning, Marcus entered the Liberty HQ a gyno security clearance required this time. He was escorted directly to a closed-door executive session. Inside, the room had changed. There were no raised voices, just quiet faces and trembling hands. Whitman, flanked by 2 of the last loyal board members, looked up You're destroying our company, he said. No, Marcus corrected. You destroyed it years ago. I'm just pulling back the curtain. Wittmann's mask slipped. What do you want? A seat at the table. The CEO title Marcus dropped a leather folder on the table. I want a binding vote to replace the current board with a new leadership slate diverse, qualified, and committed to dismantling every discriminatory practice you buried under efficiency. You don't have the votes. Marcus leaned in. Check again. Wittmann glanced at Victoria Harding, who nodded grimly. He has the votes. Wittmann exhaled. Then we'll fight you in court. No, Marcus said quietly. You'll surrender in writing. Or this he opened the folder goes to the press. Inside internal memos, complaint logs, passenger complaint demographics, and algorithm code highlighting racial identifiers words like ethnically disruptive, non-conforming apparel, and excessive documentation required. Victoria closed her eyes. God. Wittmann read in silence, then said, You want full control. I want the discrimination to end. No severance. No immunity. You're going to crucify us. I'll offer accountability. Marcus replied. Not vengeance, but only if this transition happens now. Wittmann stood, trembling. Then take it. The following week, Liberty Airlines held the most watched shareholder meeting in its history. Reporters packed the lobby. Employees stared at the live stream. Marcus Reynolds stood at the podium not as a victim, but as a victor. Shareholders representing over 41% of voting rights have demanded structural change, he announced. Effective immediately. The following board members will step down. He read 7 names. Each resignation was met with thunderous applause from staff people who had long suffered in silence. Then came the announcement that shocked even Marcus's closest allies. I've also accepted the resignation of CEO Richard Wittmann, he said, and at the board's request, I will serve as interim CEO until the permanent successor is confirmed. The room fell silent. Marcus, once dragged through this same terminal in shame, was now in command. But his next move would prove that this wasn't just about power. It was about change. As reporters scrambled to publish headlines, Marcus issued his first executive order. Effective immediately, all algorithmic passenger profiling is suspended. The second, an external audit of Liberty's treatment practices, employee protocols, and complaint histories will begin within 48 hours. And the third, any employee previously retaliated against for reporting discrimination is invited to confidentially share their story with amnesty and restitution. Liberty Airlines wasn't being repaired, it was being rebuilt, and Marcus Reynolds was just getting started. Marcus Reynolds sat in the freshly renamed Liberty Now Phoenix Air Executive Suite, scanning his inbox. The announcement of his interim CEO role had triggered a corporate quake. Internally, he was flooded with congratulations, press requests, and policy transition memos. Externally, however, a storm was brewing, within 24 hours of assuming leadership. Marcus's first full suspension of Liberty's passenger profiling system sparked panic in the airline's operations division. The algorithm hadn't just guided upgrades and seating, it had deeply embedded itself in Liberty's logistics, scheduling, and ticket yield calculations. Removing it was like pulling a live wire from a grid. And now, the system was crashing. Flight upgrades jammed. Overbooking protocols failed. Agents were confused. Some employees grumbled loudly in internal forums, calling Marcus's reforms performative, reckless, or worse, woke disruption for social media clout. The HR inbox flooded with complaints, some valid, others masked attempts at sabotage. James burst into Marcus's office with a tight jaw. "We've got a problem." Just one James held up a tablet. A VP in operations just leaked an internal memo to a conservative business outlet. They're calling the reforms an overcorrection. The headline reads, "Tech CEO turns airline into political battlefield, profits plummet." Marcus scanned the article. Misquotes, exaggerations, out-of-context screenshots. But the story was already gaining traction. How bad is it? Shares dropped 3%. Our inboxes are clogged with threats from angry frequent flyers. One senator even tweeted a jab about wokeness in the skies. "Perfect," Marcus said, unmoved. "Send the full flight data to Alexis. I want every customer satisfaction metric from the last 90 days compared to the current week. But you just got in. Of course numbers are down. That's not the point. I want to show cause and correlation before this media firestorm defines our work." Meanwhile, Alexis Phoenix Air's acting general counsel had uncovered a more dangerous threat. A senior compliance officer, Angela Durbin, had not only opposed Marcus's reforms in private, but had sent encrypted messages to Liberty's former board members. Messages indicating the intent to undermine data-sharing audits, delay retraining programs, and preserve existing discriminatory frameworks under a new name. "She's sabotaging us from within," Alexis said grimly. "If this leaks, it won't just be a betrayal. It'll be an institutional cancer. It'll mean the rot wasn't in the leadership. It was in the infrastructure." Marcus stood silently, staring out the tall glass window as jets taxied on the runway. She was promoted last year. Right, yes. Under Whitman. Fast-tracked after building the algorithm refinement team. "Bring her in," Marcus said. "Now." Angela Durbin walked into the conference room like a soldier marching to a tribunal. Her blazer was sharp, her expression steel. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes," Marcus said without looking up. "Have a seat." She didn't. "Angela, we've traced a series of internal delays and miscommunications back to your department. System crashes, retraining reschedules, and unapproved edits to the new bias protocols. Sir, implementing new structures causes hiccups. Nothing more." James slid a printed copy of her encrypted Slack messages across the table, then explained this. "Hold retraining. These woke measures will expire with him." Sent 2 days ago to a private thread of former Liberty execs. Angela froze. Marcus finally looked up. "That doesn't sound like a hiccup. That sounds like intent. Two didn't mean, oh, you meant every word. You thought I'd be temporary, that I'd take a photo at the top and vanish. But here's the part you didn't calculate. Angela Me job isn't PR. It's dismantling systems like the one you designed." He slid her termination letter forward. "Effective immediately. Your access has been revoked." Angela's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake. People like me built this airline." Marcus stood, his voice low. "No. People like you built the excuses. Now get out of my building." The next day, Marcus convened the first all-hands meeting since the takeover. Over 15,000 employees, tuned-in pilots from Atlanta, baggage crews in Boston, flight attendants watching from terminals worldwide. "This is a moment of discomfort," Marcus began, "because transformation always is. But let me be clear. Phoenix Air will not be a compromise between old discrimination and new expectations. We will not preserve broken systems for profit." He walked across the stage slowly, letting his words settle. You may hear noise from outside, headlines designed to spark outrage, voices claiming we're overreaching. But look at the data since suspending passenger profiling. We've had a 43% drop in onboard complaints. Customer satisfaction among premium travelers of color has nearly doubled, and contrary to fear, our cancellation rate has decreased. He tapped the screen. Here's why: when people feel respected, they return. When employees know they'll be supported for doing the right thing, morale increases. And when a company leads with values, shareholders eventually catch up. The room burst into applause. Still, Marcus's eyes scanned the crowd, because not everyone was clapping. In the back row, a few familiar faces from Liberty's prior leadership looked on silent, arms crossed. They weren't gone yet. The old guard had lost control of the boardroom, but their ideology, it was still trying to survive, and Marcus knew if he didn't confront it directly, it would rise again. The message came in at 2:17 a.m. Marcus was in his hotel suite overlooking Phoenix Air headquarters, sipping lukewarm tea and reviewing legal depositions when his encrypted phone buzzed. Unknown sender, I worked on Liberty's back-end algorithm team. What you've seen so far is just surface. The real bias is in the predictive security matrix. Check update v6.34. I'll share proof, but only in person. Attached a file name, partially redacted source code, and a timestamp from a restricted server. Marcus stared at the screen. The formatting was familiar. It matched the same system Liberty once claimed was decommissioned. He immediately forwarded it to Phoenix Air's CTO, Hannah Nguyen, with one line: run this down, securely, quietly. The next morning, Marcus met the sender at a quiet coffee shop near the Seattle docks. A wiry man in his 30s sat in the corner booth, eyes darting between the window and the door. You, Marcus, I am, and you're risking a lot by being here. I'm not brave. I'm just tired, he said, of watching people get flagged, removed, questioned because of code I helped write. Show me. He opened a battered laptop and pulled up a string of encrypted JSON files. Liberty didn't just use names and ethnic indicators. They used geospatial activity tracking, flagging passengers who flew to certain countries, or who spent extended time in majority-minority zip codes. Their system didn't say race, but it didn't have to. He scrolled to a key line: Jason Sao Chep Chin, SUA, flag, risk, bost profile, high-density zone, non-alphanumeric name, irregular speech cadence. Speech cadence. Marcus asked, yeah, Liberty had a beta feature. Recorded boarding interactions to analyze speech tempo and accent deviation. It flagged foreign-born English speakers. Marcus sat back. You built this. I tried to fix it, got sidelined, then promoted to shut up. You know how it goes. You kept a copy, I kept everything. Someone had to. Marcus looked him dead in the eye. What's your name? The man hesitated. Doesn't matter. Just make sure they can't erase this. Back at headquarters, Hannah had finished her analysis. This isn't just unethical. It's illegal. They've essentially created a digital discrimination engine and embedded it in airport systems through shared security APIs. TSA never knew the data they were receiving had been pre-filtered. She handed Marcus a folder. The update logs show this code was revised just 4 weeks before your incident. Who approved it? Angela Durbin and a man named Edward Marsh, former CTO, now quietly consulting for regional airlines through shell firms. Marcus nodded. Get me everything we can tie to Marsh, then prepare an internal sweep. I want any version of this system completely eradicated by tomorrow morning. But that's not all. Hannah added. There's more. She pulled up a visual heat map of Liberty Airlines' internal user accounts. While we were focusing on the profiling code, I found something else: unauthorized data mining. Liberty's system also flagged employees who accessed files tied to discrimination cases or bias policy. They were profiling their own staff. Marcus asked, "Yes? Any employee who searched bias training, racial incident, or accessed HR complaint logs was logged and tagged. It's how they knew who to silence early." Marcus felt the chill crawl up his spine. This was systematic control, disguised as company security. "Shut it down," he said. "Every node, every trace. Before this goes public, I want it erased from our infrastructure." Meanwhile, word of the data breach was beginning to spread. A national tech ethics group caught wind of Marcus's investigation and requested a formal interview. "I'm not ready," he told James. "You need to be," James replied. "The press will shape the narrative if you don't." That night, Marcus sat before a camera under soft lights. No scripts, no consultants, just truth. "What we've discovered," he began, "isn't just negligence. It's a coded hierarchy, written by people who never had to fear being profiled. It's been passed off as efficiency, security, customer segmentation, but it's discrimination wrapped in software." He paused. "And if we hadn't taken control, it would have continued silently, forever." The clip hit 5 million views in a single weekend, but not everyone celebrated. The whistleblower who'd shared the algorithm vanished 2 days later. His apartment was cleared out, email deactivated, phone disconnected. James stormed into Marcus's office. "We've called every contact. No one's heard from him. I think someone's covering tracks." Marcus leaned forward. "Then it's time to expose the entire machine. Every node, every contributor, every enabler." He turned to Hannah. "Call in the cyber forensics team. If Liberty used this system, so did their partners. We follow the digital fingerprints." "And what about retaliation?" Alexis asked. "If this gets out, you'll be enemy number 1 to every legacy airline and security firm in the country." Marcus stared at the wall. "Good. That means we're aiming in the right direction." Outside his window, the Phoenix Air logo gleamed under the night lights. The bird that once symbolized corporate spin had taken new meaning. This wasn't just about cleaning house. This was a reckoning data line by data line. And Marcus had only just begun. The boardroom was silent, except for the rhythmic tapping of Marcus's pen on the table. "Is this really worth escalating?" asked Raj Patel, Phoenix Air's newly appointed board member. "We've removed the profiling systems. Public trust is recovering. Do we need to dig deeper?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked to the digital display, bringing up a heat map of Liberty's former partner Airline small regional carriers and code share networks. The map was lit up like a battlefield, with clusters of flagged data transfer points and legacy algorithm footprints. "These aren't rumors," he said. "These are live links." The discrimination didn't end with Liberty. It metastasized through every airline that bought their software or licensed their boarding protocols. He turned, eyes scanning the room. "If we stop now, we're not reformers, we're decorators. We'd be dressing up a rotten system with a fresh logo." Silence. Then James leaned forward. "We launch the initiative." 2 hours later, the plan went live. Operation Echo. It would target every known Liberty affiliate, beginning with Goldwing Airlines, a midsize, privately owned carrier that had historically evaded public scrutiny. Their partnership with Liberty had extended over 10 years, and they still used Liberty's deprecated comfort profile system. Marcus's cyber forensics team had confirmed that Goldwing's system flagged passengers with African, Arabic, and Latin origin names for additional screening at check-in. These passengers were 83% more likely to be randomly reassigned from premium cabins. The next morning, Marcus held a press conference not to accuse Goldwing directly, but to issue a challenge. At Phoenix Air, we've removed discriminatory systems from our infrastructure. We now invite every partner airline, past and present, to conduct a joint audit of their systems and publicly commit to equitable service. He paused. To refuse this audit is to admit there's something to hide. The gauntlet was thrown. Goldwing's CEO responded the next day. Furious, we categorically deny all allegations. Mr. Reynolds is attempting to expand his market share by slandering competitors with politically motivated theatrics. But what they didn't anticipate was the next wave. Within 48 hours, 3 former Goldwing employees came forward, anonymous at first, then public. Their stories echoed Liberty's dark legacy. A black mother removed from business class because her ticket was flagged as likely fraudulent. A Korean doctor denied boarding after a system glitch marked her as non-priority risk. A veteran airline agent fired for refusing to follow a supervisor's directive to scrutinize urban zip code passengers harder. The media erupted. Marcus's inbox flooded. The story hit every major network. Meanwhile, Goldwing's stock plummeted. Inside Phoenix Air, pressure mounted from all sides. James rushed into Marcus's office. Goldwing just filed a cease and desist. They're accusing us of defamation, tortious interference, and misappropriation of proprietary systems. Marcus barely looked up. Good. That means they're scared. They're also threatening to pull out of our code-share routes. That affects 17% of Phoenix Air's reach into the Midwest. Then we adjust. But Marcus, if we lose those routes, our Q2 projection drops 12%. Marcus paused. And if we stay quiet, we lose our soul. That night, as he stood in front of the empty executive lounge, he recorded a video message unscripted, raw. If doing the right thing costs us profits, so be it. Phoenix Air doesn't trade in silence. We don't partner with companies that treat fairness like a luxury add-on. The video went viral, but not without cost. The retaliation began within 72 hours. Partner airlines began canceling shared lounge access for Phoenix passengers. Industry trade groups issued veiled condemnations. A major loyalty program downgraded Phoenix Air's status. And worst of all, airports started getting pressure. Marcus received a call from the Atlanta hub director. Marcus, look, I'm with you, but I've got my own board breathing down my neck. They're considering revoking Phoenix's priority gate status if this investigation keeps tanking traffic from your partner carriers. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Marcus ended the call and sat alone in his darkened office. For the first time in months, doubt crept in. Not because he was wrong, but because he wondered, could a single airline change an industry without being crushed by it? Then came a knock. Zoe, his longtime assistant and closest confidant, stepped in. I think you need to see this. She handed him a tablet. It was a letter, an open one. Signed by over 200 former Liberty and Goldwing passengers, many of whom had never spoken publicly before. The title, We Were Profiled. Now we fly with Phoenix. They didn't just share testimonials. They offered their stories to Congress, to regulators, to airline unions. One wrote, "This company treated me like a person, not a profile. Finally." Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled. This was the tipping point. The next day, an unexpected ally emerged. Delta Skyone of the Big Three carriers issued a statement praising Phoenix Air's reforms and announcing they would voluntarily audit their own customer service data. That statement alone swung public opinion again. The tide was turning. Slowly, but this time was real. Marcus stepped onto the stage of the Global Airline Industry Ethics Summit just 2 weeks later. He had been asked to open the event, no longer as the outsider with a grievance, but as the man who changed flight. The stage lights at the Airline Industry Ethics Summit were blinding, but Marcus Reynolds didn't flinch. The grand ballroom at the Geneva Convention Center was packed with airline executives, regulators, labor union leaders, and press from 5 continents. Most had never heard of Phoenix Air 6 months ago. Now, they were calling it the conscience of aviation. And Marcus Reynolds, a man escorted from first class, stood as keynote speaker. He stepped up to the podium, adjusted his mic, and let the silence stretch before he spoke. When you board an airplane, you surrender more than luggage, you surrender power. You trust the people in charge to treat you fairly at 35,000 feet. And what we've learned is some of that power has been abused. He glanced around the room, locking eyes with familiar faces from Liberty, Goldwing, even old Phoenix competitors. For decades, discrimination was encoded not in company handbooks but in algorithms, quiet biases written into lines of code. Phrases like passenger compatibility, risk flagging, or service thresholds masked something darker, something intentional. A murmur rolled through the crowd. He let it hang, then clicked the clicker. A graph appeared on the screen: racial profiling by zip code, pulled from the legacy systems Phoenix had uncovered. "This isn't about intent," Marcus continued. "It's about outcome. If your systems produce discrimination, your values don't matter. Applause polite, but growing." He clicked again. New slide: passenger complaint settlements. 2010-2025. 74% involved people of color. He clicked a third time. Stock performance of airlines with anti-discrimination enforcement versus those without. Still think equity is a cost. Now the applause was loud and not just polite. He concluded, "Phoenix Air didn't just remove bias. We replaced it with proof that treating passengers with dignity is good business. If we can do it, you can. And if you don't, we'll see you at the shareholder meeting." The room erupted, but not everyone was clapping. After the speech, Marcus returned to the green room, wiping sweat from his collar. James followed behind, face lit up. "You just flipped the entire industry on its head." "I laid the foundation," Marcus corrected. "Now we find out who's serious." But his phone buzzed. A message from Zoe. Urgent. Department of Transportation requesting private session. Re-legislative partnership. He blinked. The U.S. federal government had watched from afar until now. An hour later, Marcus sat across from Secretary of Transportation Lila Hargrove. She leaned in. "I'll get to the point. We want to make Phoenix Air's Equal Skies Protocol the national standard. Bias-free boarding, auditable upgrade algorithms, third-party complaint review." Marcus blinked. "You're asking to federalize our model. We're asking for your help writing the rulebook. You've proven it works. But we need your leadership and your terms. We give Phoenix Air official endorsement, public praise, maybe even tax incentives to expand. Marcus didn't answer right away. Then I want every airline required to publish quarterly reports on passenger demographics and treatment metrics. She nodded. Done. Back at Phoenix Air HQ, news traveled fast. Phoenix Air to advise federal discrimination standards for airlines. It was the front page of the Wall Street Journal the next morning, but not everyone was thrilled. A coalition of legacy airline CEOs filed an immediate injunction to delay any federal adoption. Lawsuits flew. They called Marcus a monopolist, a disruptor, a man leveraging discrimination for profit. Marcus didn't bother responding. Instead, he doubled down. He went live on 60 Minutes. If pushing for transparency and fairness means I'm labeled dangerous, then let me be clear. I'm not dangerous because I fight back. I'm dangerous because I'm winning. The interview pulled record ratings. More importantly, it did something unexpected. It emboldened employees across the country, gate agents, flight attendants, mechanics workers of color began coming forward. An anonymous memo from a United Sky flight crew read, "After years of enforcing invisible rules, we finally see a company doing it right. We want change, too." Another from a baggage handler in Texas Phoenix Air is what we all said we wanted but thought we'd never get. Change wasn't just coming from the top anymore. It was rising from the bottom. A week later, Marcus flew to Chicago for a panel at the North American Aviation Forum. Halfway through, a familiar face raised his hand in the crowd. Richard Whitman, former CEO of Liberty Airlines. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Whitman stood. "Mr. Reynolds, do you believe a man like me, who led a company that discriminated for years, deserves a second chance?" The room held its breath. Marcus stepped down from the stage and approached the microphone on the floor. "I believe anyone can change, but not everyone will. So here's the test. Don't ask for forgiveness. Ask for a role in fixing what you broke." He extended a hand. The crowd gasped. Whitman hesitated, then shook it. It was a moment that would be replayed on television for months. As the conference ended, Marcus received one final message from his assistant. "Check gate 12 before your flight. You'll want to see this." Curious. He made his way there. Waiting at the gate was an elderly woman in a wheelchair. A sign rested on her lap. "Boarding Phoenix Air. First class. For the first time in my life." Her daughter leaned down and whispered. She never flew before because she didn't think she'd be treated right. "You changed that." Marcus nodded, too moved to speak. The boarding agent approached them both. "Dr. Reynolds, we've reserved you both 1A and 1B. Our captain asked me to pass along a message. Thank you for making the skies equal again." And as they boarded, passengers stood to block but to honor. 3 weeks after Geneva, Phoenix Air's Equal Skies policy was no longer just a corporate innovation. It was on the brink of becoming national law. Marcus sat in the back row of a Capitol Hill hearing room, flanked by James and Zoe, watching as lawmakers debated the most aggressive anti-discrimination reform in aviation history. The bill, titled the Air Passenger Equality Act, borrowed language directly from Phoenix Air's internal policies: mandatory equity audits, public demographic reporting, transparent upgrade algorithms, and for the first time ever federal fines for verified passenger discrimination. But this hearing wasn't just a victory lap. It was a war zone. Opposing the bill was the National Alliance of Legacy Carriers, a lobbying group bankrolled by Liberty Airlines, Goldwing, and others still reeling from Marcus's industry shakeup. Their spokesman, Harold Dempsey, stepped up to the mic. This bill is an overreach. Algorithms aren't racist, people misinterpret them. You'll punish every airline for a few unfortunate incidents. Let the free market self-correct. From the gallery, a voice called out. Self-correction failed. That's why we're here. Marcus Reynolds was Bradley Williams, the former Liberty supervisor, now Phoenix Air's Director of Inclusive Customer Experience. A murmur ran through the room. Dempsey continued. We respect Mr. Reynolds's achievements, but he's an outlier. Most companies can't afford the kind of surveillance and compliance teams Phoenix uses. That was Marcus's cue. He stepped forward. Mr. Dempsey, Marcus said, his voice calm but commanding. You're right. Most companies can't afford our model because they've spent decades investing in litigation teams instead of accountability systems. He paused. But what they can afford is to stop discriminating. The crowd applauded. Dempsey fumbled. And what do you propose? Mr. Reynolds' government control of corporate policy, no. Marcus replied, corporate responsibility as the price of public privilege. Airlines operate on taxpayer-funded infrastructure. You use federal air traffic control, federal safety inspectors, federal bailouts. You want federal support for no federal standards. Silence. A congressman leaned into his mic. Mr. Reynolds, would Phoenix Air assist in implementation if this becomes law? Yes, Marcus answered. Free of charge. The room erupted. Back at Phoenix HQ, the momentum was electric. Zoe sprinted into Marcus's office. The Senate version of the bill just passed committee. By next month, it's likely to go to full vote. We're changing federal law. Marcus, I know, he replied. Now let's make sure we're ready to handle what comes after, because the backlash would be global. Indeed, it arrived that night. Fox Global ran an exposé, The Cult of Marcus Reynolds Hero, or Corporate Tyrant. Its centerpiece, a secretly recorded audio clip of Marcus during a private meeting. If we can't buy change, we'll build the companies that force others to follow. Taken out of context, it sounded ruthless. The internet erupted. Conservative commentators called him a reverse segregationist. Former Phoenix investors anonymously leaked internal memos. Online trolls flooded his inbox with hate. Even some moderate allies asked, is this about equity or empire? Marcus didn't defend himself. He doubled down. He published the full recording, context included. The room had been discussing whether to acquire or build new vendors to force upstream industry reform. The quote had been accurate. So was his response. Yes, I'll build what others fear, companies that make fairness profitable. That clarity worked. New York Times ran the headline, he's not playing the game. He's rewriting it. The next morning, a major airline CEO called, not with threats but with an offer. It was Arturo Silva, head of Azul Aero, South America's fourth largest carrier. I've read everything, Silva said. We want in. We'll adopt equal skies across our fleet if Phoenix Air licenses the training, tech, and audit tools. You want to franchise the system? Marcus asked. No, Silva replied. We want to be partners, real ones. I'm tired of pretending this stuff doesn't happen. You showed the world it can change. They set the meeting. Within a week, 4 international carriers had requested licensing rights to equal skies. Marcus's vision was no longer an airline. It was a movement. But then came the twist. A whistleblower from within Liberty's board sent a cryptic email to Zoe. They're preparing a final move. Not legal, not financial, personal. Watch your 6. Hours later, James found it. A private investigator had been hired to dig into Marcus's family. Zoe's old debt history was leaked online. Marcus's teenage daughter's school records were accessed illegally. It was no longer a PR war. It was psychological warfare. Zoe, shaken, approached Marcus. "Maybe we take a step back. This is getting dangerous." But Marcus shook his head. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about every employee who sees a future because of what we've started. Every passenger who walks into a gate without fear. We're not stepping back." He turned to James. "Prepare the full offensive." The next morning, Marcus met with Congress again, but this time, not as a witness. He was now an author of legislation. The Equal Skies Law passed the House with a narrow margin. But enough. As media converged on the Capitol steps, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Reynolds, is this the end of the fight?" "No," Marcus replied. "It's the end of denial." And behind him, Bradley Williams stood quietly, holding a sign, "Equal Skies, we're not asking anymore." The morning after the Equal Skies legislation passed the House, Marcus Reynolds woke to an inbox full of alerts. Cyber attack. Not just a standard phishing scheme or denial of service blast. This was precision sabotage. Someone had inserted malicious code into Phoenix Air's gate scheduling software, temporarily corrupting boarding records and disrupting flights in 7 major airports. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a message. And Marcus knew exactly who sent it. He didn't say a word to his staff. Instead, he put on his Navy suit, straightened his collar, and walked straight into the Phoenix Cyber Command Center, a former tech war room repurposed into the airline's digital control heart. How bad, he asked flatly. His CTO, Neha Sharma, looked grim. The attack came from multiple locations: proxy masking, advanced persistent threat tactics. We're tracing everything, but someone knew exactly where our vulnerabilities were. Internal leak, almost certainly. Zoe stepped in. "Our system's secure now, but the story is leaking. Media's already spinning it as technical incompetence." Marcus didn't blink. "They think this knocks us down." James entered with a folder. Worse, Liberty's team fed the press a rumor that this glitch was the result of racial quotas in hiring our IT staff. Marcus's jaw tensed. They're not just attacking us, they're discrediting the very idea of diversity. A silent rage simmered beneath his tailored surface. Then he said 4 words. Time to go public. That evening, Marcus held a live press conference. No PR team, no teleprompters, just a podium, a screen, and a truth that needed revealing. "They tried to crash our systems," he began, but their real target wasn't software, it was trust. He clicked the remote. On the screen, a map showing the cyber attack's entry points, followed by email records from a former Liberty contractor, now cooperating with federal investigators. These weren't rogue actors. These were corporate mercenaries paid to sabotage a competitor using cyber terror tactics. Gasps from the reporters. But that's not the revelation I'm here to share. Click. A new slide, Liberty Airlines Project Passenger Stratification. Confidential. What followed was devastating. Internal documents, emails, and code samples from Liberty's legacy systems showed deliberate passenger profiling software designed to reroute passengers of color into lower-tier service categories. Even more damning. The system had built-in logic to identify frequent travelers with minority surnames and slow their upgrade approvals. They had digitized discrimination. Marcus looked directly into the cameras. This wasn't unconscious bias. This was engineered. The internet exploded. By midnight, Liberty sabotage was trending worldwide. And that wasn't all. At 2:34 a.m., a Phoenix security staffer found a flash drive anonymously dropped into a corporate Dropbox. Its contents: a whistleblower's full video deposition. A former Liberty software engineer named Elena DeSantos sat in front of a webcam, pale and trembling. "I built parts of this system," she said. "We were told it was about customer experience optimization, but we were given lists of surnames and instructed to deprioritize sensitive travelers. They never said Black or Latinx or Arab, but we knew." She paused, looking directly into the lens. "I stayed silent because I needed the job, but I can't be quiet anymore." By morning, 4 more whistleblowers had come forward. By noon, Congress had called for a special investigatory hearing. By 3 p.m., Liberty Airlines' stock had dropped 22%. But Marcus wasn't celebrating. He sat in his glass-walled office, lights off, watching the news scroll silently across his screen. James entered, hesitant. "You okay?" "No," Marcus replied. "This isn't justice yet. This is exposure, but exposure fades. Then what's next?" Marcus turned slowly. Consequence. That consequence came quickly. The Department of Transportation issued a cease and desist order to Liberty Airlines, suspending all bonus executive payouts pending investigation. The SEC launched a separate probe into shareholder deception based on non-disclosure of the sabotage campaign. The FBI Cybercrime Division seized Liberty's servers. And in a quiet courtroom in Delaware, Marcus filed something no one saw coming: a lawsuit on behalf of all passengers affected by algorithmic discrimination over the past 10 years. Class action, thousands of plaintiffs, billions in damages. A legal journalist tweeted, "If this succeeds, Liberty won't just pay, it will cease to exist." Marcus gathered his team that night. This is our moment, but it's also our mirror. We can't just take Liberty's place and continue their model with new faces. Everyone nodded. He continued, "We don't build new systems to imitate the old ones with better PR. We rebuild them from scratch, transparent, accountable, equitable." Then he looked at Neha. "I want our booking algorithm open source." "Silence. That's revolutionary," she said. "It'll expose our IP to competitors." "Good," Marcus replied. "Let them use it. If we're serious about reform, we lead by example. Make it public. Let every airline in the world implement it for free." Zoe looked stunned. "But Marcus, we lose leverage." He smiled. "No, we gain legitimacy. That's how you change the system." The next morning, Phoenix Air published its entire passenger ranking codebase online, accompanied by an open letter titled, "No Secrets, No Bias, No Excuses." The industry had never seen anything like it, and it was just the beginning. Because as Marcus returned home that night, exhausted but focused, a package waited at his door. Inside was a letter, handwritten, from the elderly woman he met at Gate 12. "For most of my life, I believed flying in dignity was for other people. But now, because of you, my granddaughter won't have to feel that way. You gave her more than a seat. You gave her worth. Don't stop now." Marcus folded the letter, placed it inside his journal, and sat quietly, watching the city lights. He knew what had to come next. Not lawsuits, not settlements, but legacy. And the blueprint was just beginning. The city of Chicago woke under a sky draped in low fog as Marcus Reynolds prepared for what could be his final confrontation with Liberty Airlines' legacy machine. He stood before the grand rotunda of the Federal Aviation Oversight Council, about to give testimony not as a victim or CEO but as a man determined to change history. Inside the chamber, legacy airline CEOs lined one side of the hearing table stern. Silver-haired men in Navy suits who had weathered every regulation, bailout, and scandal the industry could throw at them. And across from them stood Marcus, armed not with lawyers, but with results. Phoenix Air's numbers glowed on the screen behind him. Plus 28%. Revenue growth, 64%. Complaints filed, plus 33%. Minority customer retention, 0. Verified bias incidents in 6 months. He turned to face the council. "I'm not here to accuse," Marcus began. "I'm here to propose." He laid out the Equal Skies Federal Compliance Framework, an industry-wide blueprint for audit-driven anti-bias accountability, voluntary algorithm transparency, and standardized passenger service metrics. One of the council members, an older woman in a red suit, interrupted. And if companies decline, Marcus didn't flinch. Then let the market decide. We've proven fairness scales. Let passengers choose who values them. At the back of the chamber, Liberty's interim CEO, Ellen Park, watched in silence. She'd been appointed after Wittmann's removal. Cold, calculating, corporate to the core. After the session, she approached. "You're winning hearts, Marcus, but hearts don't sustain quarterly earnings." "No," Marcus replied, "but trust does, and I have that now." That evening, Marcus received a quiet call from a familiar name, Richard Wittmann. The disgraced former Liberty CEO's voice was raspier, wearier. "I've watched the fallout," Wittmann said. "You're making something real out of all this. I never saw that coming." "You saw it," Marcus replied. "You just didn't believe it mattered." A pause. "I want to talk," Wittmann continued. "In person. No threats. No lawyers. Just clarity." Marcus hesitated. And then he agreed. They met the next day in a small, nondescript diner near O'Hare Airport. Marcus entered alone. Wittmann was already seated at a corner booth, aged by stress and scandal. "I was wrong," Wittmann said without preamble. "Not just about you. About the whole system. I thought the culture at Liberty was an asset. It was a liability." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why now?" Wittmann reached into his coat and slid over a small drive. Everything. The real archive. Internal memos. Emails. Board conversations. Vendor instructions. Stuff even your whistleblowers haven't seen. "Why give me this? Because I know what you're trying to build," Wittmann said quietly. "And I know how deep the rot went. Some of it I helped design. You should have the full map." Marcus nodded once. Legacy wasn't about the past. It was about who you left empowered when you stepped down. Back at Phoenix HQ, the drive's contents blew the lid off everything. Emails from Liberty board members discussing how to bury discrimination settlements using LLC shells. Vendor memos instructing flight attendants to flag visually disruptive passengers for secondary verification. A training guide that literally listed suspicious customer indicators based on accent and clothing. "Unreal," whispered Zoe. "This isn't bias, it's policy." Marcus stared at the files. "We file this, not for PR, for prosecution." The next day, Marcus met with Department of Justice officials in Washington. He handed them the drive. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's accountability. If laws mean anything, then this goes to court." The DOJ launched a formal criminal probe against former Liberty executives, marking the first time a U.S. airline faced federal charges for systemic discrimination. The story dominated headlines. Justice at 30,000 feet. Investigates airline bias scandal. Cable panels debated whether this would lead to industry-wide reform or just another symbolic punishment. But Marcus didn't join the noise. He was building something louder. Within days, 10 more airlines reached out to license Equal Skies software and training frameworks, not out of guilt, but because Phoenix Air's success had made fairness a competitive advantage. Marcus greenlit expansion. Zoe launched an internal think tank Equiflight to offer consulting services for global travel equity. Bradley Williams, once the agent of humiliation, now led a team working on the first-ever International Passenger Dignity Index. And Neha unveiled a passenger-facing app that allowed flyers to report discrimination in real time, triggering internal audits and corrective action. Marcus smiled at the demo. We've made transparency the new luxury, but not everyone celebrated. In a dim hotel bar in Zurich, a former Liberty board member named Gerald Fleming nursed his scotch and whispered into a phone. "He's destabilizing the global model," Fleming said. "Too fast, too visible. You need to slow him down." The voice on the other end was cold and confident. Then we hit where it hurts. Back in Chicago, Marcus returned home one night to find his front door open. Inside, the house was quiet, but on his dining table, someone had left a single object. His daughter's private school photo, sliced diagonally down the middle. James arrived minutes later. Marcus handed him the photo. No more subtlety. Marcus said grimly, "They're coming off the leash." James nodded. "Then we fight differently now." That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in a year. He opened the original boarding pass, the one they told him wasn't valid. He framed it and placed it next to the Equal Skies bill, now signed into law, from denial to dignity. And tomorrow, he'd go one step further. He'd ground the airline industry's silence permanently. 4 days after the federal investigation into Liberty Airlines went public, Marcus Reynolds arrived at a high-rise office in Lower Manhattan under an alias. No entourage, no press, just precision. Waiting inside executives from Crescent Partners, the largest private equity firm in the global transportation sector. They didn't know Marcus personally, but they knew of him. Phoenix Air's turnaround had shaken boardrooms worldwide. Now, Crescent wanted to offer him something unprecedented, a leveraged acquisition partnership to consolidate control over struggling U.S. airlines before they collapsed under reputational pressure. But Marcus had a different plan. "I'm not here to buy airlines," he said. "I'm here to buy silence and replace it with accountability." Confused glances. He opened a briefcase and laid out a document labeled the Concord Accords, a voluntary industry compact for passenger equality. It wasn't a government mandate. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was an industry-wide proposal that would give Phoenix Air and its coalition control over standard setting in exchange for immediate reputation shielding and tech infrastructure sharing. "You want us to surrender sovereignty?" asked one executive. "I want you to avoid extinction," Marcus replied calmly. The market's already moved. Either adapt or disappear. Back in Chicago, things were moving even faster. Phoenix Air launched FlyFare, the world's first real-time transparency dashboard, displaying every airline's customer treatment metrics, disaggregated by race, gender, disability status, and service tier. No airline had ever done it. Phoenix Air now made it mandatory for all flights. Other airlines scrambled. Legal departments filed objections. Aviation trade groups issued warnings. But customers, they loved it. Overnight, Phoenix Air's bookings rose 22%. The public could now see live how many complaints of bias were filed that day, and how quickly they were resolved. And when one legacy airline tried to copy the model using dummy data, Phoenix's AI flagged the irregularities within hours. Marcus didn't blast them publicly. He sent a quiet message. Fix it, or we will. They fixed it. Meanwhile, inside Liberty Airlines, quiet changes were already underway even before full board control had transitioned. New compliance teams were embedded. Data transparency was forced open, and employees who once feared retaliation were now whistleblowing from within. Heather Davidson, the flight attendant who had once denied Marcus his seat, now led a task force training over 2,000 frontline employees on equity and bias interruption. She appeared in a Phoenix-produced training video, facing the camera directly. "I used to believe I was just following orders," she said. "Then I realized silence is the order." The video went viral. Marcus continued operating 2 tracks: public reform and private revolution. While media hailed his leadership, he met in secret with government officials, tech pioneers, and former airline competitors to build something bigger. The Sky Ledger Alliance, a blockchain-backed, open-source ledger for all passenger complaint resolution, historiesfully anonymized, but fully auditable. No more buried reports. No more NDA silencing. No more cover-ups. And it wouldn't just apply to Phoenix Air. He planned to donate the codebase to the U.S. Department of Transportation, enabling every passenger in America to track how airlines handled service issues in real time. Neha, his CTO, was stunned. "You're giving away the advantage. We're making it impossible to hide injustice again." Marcus replied, "We don't need exclusivity. We need irreversibility." But even as Marcus dismantled the old system piece by piece, enemies regrouped. In a closed-door summit in Geneva, a coalition of global aviation CEOs met to discuss the Phoenix problem. "We let him dictate the narrative." One French executive fumed. He turned corporate policy into civil rights theater, another German CEO added. But it was the Japanese airline director who said what they all feared. He made fairness profitable. And now, we can't compete unless we follow. The room fell silent. The industry had changed. Permanently. And Marcus hadn't just disrupted it. He'd captured it. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., Zoe approached Marcus with a trembling voice. "You need to see this." She showed him a file that had just been unsealed through discovery in the DOJ probe, an internal Liberty Airlines memo, dated 2 years prior, with his name redacted. It outlined a program called Passenger Visibility Optimization. The pilot program's goal: to identify potential public relations risks in high-tier cabins, especially black and brown travelers who might be perceived as misaligned with premium service expectations. It wasn't just bias. It was preemptive discrimination. And Marcus's name had been flagged in the test batch. He had been targeted before they even knew who he was. Marcus read the memo in silence. Then he said, "We're not done until this document is printed in every business ethics textbook in the country." That night, he received a call from the Secretary of Transportation. "We're proposing a national standard based on your Sky Ledger model. Would you consider joining the Oversight Commission?" Marcus stared at the skyline, then replied, "Only if it's binding. Only if we can enforce it. and only if I'm not the only one like me at the table." The secretary didn't hesitate. "Then let's make it happen." On the anniversary of the incident that started it all, Marcus stood once again at the gate where he had been denied boarding, but this time it had been renamed Gate Reynolds. A plaque stood next to it. To the traveler who turned discrimination into transformation. He touched the metal gently, not for the cameras, not for applause, but because it had finally come full circle. The humiliation, the strategy, the fire, and now, the legacy. 1 year to the day after Marcus Reynolds was escorted from the Liberty Airlines terminal in humiliation, he stood atop a glass stage in Washington, D. accepting the Presidential Medal of Business Innovation. The crowd inside the Kennedy Center roared with applause. CEOs, lawmakers, civil rights leaders, industry titans, survivors of discrimination. Behind Marcus, a video montage played airport terminals being renamed, Liberty rebranded to Phoenix Air, Equal Skies programs implemented in airports across the globe. But it was his voice that cut through the noise. "I didn't set out to build an empire," Marcus said. "I set out to make sure no one else had to carry their dignity in a briefcase, just to board a plane." The thunderous ovation that followed didn't just celebrate a man. It honored a movement. A ceiling had shattered, and the world knew who broke it. Backstage, Marcus leaned against the wall, breath shallow. Zoe rushed to him with a bottle of water. "You okay, just—" "Remembering," he said. 12 months ago, they dragged me out of that terminal like I was a threat." Now Zoe smiled. "You are one." They laughed, but before he could catch his breath, an aide approached. "Sir, the president would like a word. Privately." In the West Wing, the President of the United States extended his hand. "You changed the country without a single protest sign." Marcus shook it firmly. "No signs," he replied. "Just systems." The president gestured toward a folder on the Resolute desk. "We want to model your Equal Skies program across federal transportation, TSA, Amtrak, even DMV protocols. You up for leading it?" Marcus paused. "This isn't about one man." The president leaned in. "Exactly. It's about making sure it outlives one man." Marcus nodded. "Then let's build something no one can bury." As Marcus boarded the red-eye back to Chicago, a flight attendant handed him a sealed envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter from Dr. Vivian Carter, the elderly woman he'd sat beside on Phoenix Air 1 year ago. "Marcus, after 50 years of flying while black, I've finally been able to travel without flinching at every gate. Your reforms aren't policy to me, they're freedom. With love and deep respect. Vivian." He looked out the window. The night sky shimmered below. Cities pulsed with light. This wasn't the end of a journey. It was the beginning of everybody else's. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Phoenix HQ to find a new crisis brewing. James intercepted him in the lobby. Japan Aero just announced a competing system, Harmony Flight. They claim it improves customer satisfaction without disclosing demographic data. Marcus frowned. "Meaning, they're hiding the data again?" "Exactly," Neha added. "And it's gaining traction. Several European airlines are considering switching. Then we bring receipts." Marcus said. Later that week, Phoenix Air released the Transparency Report, a massive public database showing how equitable treatment scores had improved airline loyalty, revenue, and complaint reduction rates. Charts, audits, third-party verification, hard data that couldn't be spun, simultaneously. They launched the See Me Fly campaign testimonials from formerly marginalized passengers and employees now thriving in the system Marcus built. Within days, Harmony Flight was trending for the wrong reasons. Critics labeled it equity-washed. Airlines that had considered adopting it quietly returned to Phoenix's model. But Marcus wasn't celebrating. He was preparing for the next breach. "You know what happens when you break a ceiling?" he asked in a board meeting. "The floor above it starts to shake." Bradley, now Chief Experience Officer, nodded. "Then we brace the foundation." They rolled out Project Vantage, a predictive service tool designed to flag discrimination patterns before they manifested, using AI to guide employee interactions in real time. From gate agents to executives, every decision now came with an accountability trail. And for the first time, passengers could review that data themselves. Public trust skyrocketed. Competitors scrambled. But Marcus knew it was never about winning a race. It was about changing the track entirely. The real test came weeks later. A security guard at O'Hare Airport stopped a teenage Muslim girl wearing a hijab from entering the pre-check lane, citing random screening. The moment was caught on video, and within an hour, Not So Equal Skies began trending. Marcus saw it from his phone on the way to a lunch meeting. He canceled the meeting and flew straight to Chicago. At the terminal, he reviewed the footage with his senior team. The girl, Amina Khalil, was 16 en route to a national science fair. Her father, who had purchased business class for the family, watched helplessly as she was separated from the group and questioned for 30 minutes. "Protocol failed," Marcus said. "No." Zoe corrected him. "A person failed." They initiated Rapid Review Modia new policy that triggered live escalation whenever a bias complaint emerged in real time. The offending staff member was placed under investigation. Amina and her family were contacted. Marcus met with them in person. "I built this so no one else would go through what I did," he told them, "and I failed." Amina shook her head. "No, you came. And now it's your system that's fixing it." That moment was more powerful than any boardroom, because the legacy Marcus wanted wasn't just policy. It was presence. It was showing up. It was owning the fix, not just the credit. In the months that followed, Phoenix Air continued to soar. They launched equity-driven training hubs in 5 countries. Marcus testified before the United Nations on ethical AI in travel, and for the first time in history, an airline was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize not for charity flights, but for building dignity into design. But amid the accolades, Marcus remained grounded. Every Monday, he flew on Phoenix Air, no assistance, no VIP perks. He sat among passengers and listened, because that's where the next ceiling would crack, and he planned to be right beneath it when it fell. The collapse didn't come with a bang. It came with a board vote. At 9:17 a.m., in a sleek New York City skyscraper, shareholders of North Star Aviation, the last major U.S. airline still resisting industry reform, voted 58% in favor of a governance overhaul. For decades, North Star had been known for its elite clientele, exclusive airport lounges, and a string of lawsuits quietly settled with non-disclosure agreements. But that morning, their most powerful shareholders had had enough. They didn't cite ethics. They cited economics. Their reasoning was simple. Marcus Reynolds' model worked. It delivered customer loyalty, reduced legal liabilities, and opened new demographics for growth. And North Star, it was hemorrhaging customers, especially high-value passengers of color. They had no choice. The last fortress of the old order had fallen, and Marcus hadn't even stepped foot in their building. Meanwhile, inside Phoenix Air's strategy war room, Marcus watched the vote unfold on a projection wall. When the results came in, he didn't cheer. He just whispered, "That's one more gone." Zoe turned to him. "That was the last major holdout." "No," Marcus corrected. "The real holdout isn't a company. It's a mindset. Then let's crush that next." Across the country, media outlets dubbed it the equity cascade. In less than 18 months, Marcus's reform model had swept across the entire U.S. airline industry. But the ripple effects were global. In London, Heathrow Airport launched its own version of Equal Skies. In Dubai, Emirates Airlines invited Phoenix Tech to audit its guest services AI. In Singapore, airline CEOs requested copies of the Sky Ledger for independent replication. Marcus wasn't licensing. He was donating the codebase, and in doing so, he made it the standard. Not because he wanted credit, because he wanted compliance. But the resistance wasn't over. A leaked memo from a European airline group showed executives secretly mocking Marcus's reforms. They called them performative, unsustainable, and a publicity stunt for a woke America. Their mistake. They published it. Within hours, flyers across Europe began canceling bookings. Shareholders revolted. And Marcus. He didn't respond with a press release. He published receipts charts showing Phoenix Air's growth since Equal Skies launched, with zero need for government bailouts. In the age of accountability, numbers shouted louder than spin. The mocking executives resigned within the week. But even as the skies transformed, Marcus's greatest battle wasn't public. It was personal. His daughter, Simone, was now 16, and for the first time, she was flying solo. He watched her disappear through the TSA line at LAX, boarding a Phoenix Air flight to Boston for a science competition. It should have been a proud moment, but Marcus couldn't breathe until she texted boarded. Everyone's nice. No weird looks. He sighed in relief. This was why he did it. Not for speeches or awards, but so his daughter could travel without bracing for disrespect. Back at Phoenix HQ, a new challenge emerged. A whistleblower revealed that a third-party contractor providing customer service staff at select airports had been using outdated script, including ones with built-in profiling questions. Marcus was livid. They used our name to shield their bias. Bradley looked grim. They signed the compliance agreement. They lied. "What's the severance penalty? 12 million drusers. Pay it," Marcus said without hesitation. "And make sure they're banned from all future bids. But it'll delay service expansions in 3 cities. Then we delay." Marcus turned to Zoe. "Draft a statement. We've discovered a breach of our dignity standards. The moment we saw it, we shut it down. We will always choose values over velocity." By that evening, the public hailed Phoenix's response as the gold standard in ethical leadership. They had failed forward, and that, in the new era, was trust. The most unexpected call came the following week. It was Richard Whitman, the former Liberty CEO Marcus had dethroned. "Reynolds," he said over the line, "I just got hired." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Consulting with the UN on digital rights in transportation. You applying for sainthood?" Whitman chuckled. "No, just redemption." There was a pause. "I fought you, Marcus," he continued, "but everything you said, it was right, and I'd rather build bridges than burn out." Another pause. Then Marcus said, "Good. Start by reviewing the European memo leak. They'll need help cleaning up their house." The old guard hadn't just collapsed. It had begun to rebuild itself from within. Meanwhile, Marcus was already working on his next horizon. A joint partnership between Phoenix Air and Harvard Business School had launched a scholarship fund for students researching ethical tech in public systems. The name, the Reynolds Fellowship for Applied Justice. "I don't want them building software that scales oppression," Marcus said at the launch. "I want them building tools that scale dignity." Dozens of students applied in the first week, and Marcus reviewed everyone, personally, because the next Marcus Reynolds might already be in that class, and they deserved to fly without turbulence built into the system. That weekend, at the annual Phoenix Summit, Marcus closed the conference with a single image, a split screen. On the left, him 1 year ago, standing in the Liberty Airlines terminal as guards escorted him away. On the right, him today, addressing the largest airline in North America, which he now controlled. The caption below: "What starts as a seat can end as a system." The room exploded with applause. But Marcus didn't smile. He just stared at the screen, at both versions of himself, and whispered to no one in particular. Never again. By the start of year 2, Marcus Reynolds wasn't just running an airline. He was redefining what it meant to run any company. Phoenix Air's success had sent shockwaves through Wall Street. It wasn't just the profits, it was how those profits were made. Every quarterly report revealed something once thought impossible. Ethical infrastructure outperformed exploitative tradition. But Marcus knew numbers only told part of the story, so he set his sights higher. He wanted to rewrite the laws that governed the skies. It began with a single line item buried in federal aviation regulations. Airlines may develop their own internal passenger flagging systems. That loophole had allowed companies like Liberty to implement risk profiles that disproportionately targeted minorities under the guise of safety and fraud prevention. Marcus wanted it gone. He drafted a white paper with Phoenix's legal and ethics teams and presented it before the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. The title of his proposal: "From Bias to Boarding Eliminating Algorithmic Discrimination in Public Transit." When he walked into the hearing room in D.C., all 300 seats were full. Some senators rolled their eyes. Others leaned forward. One whispered, "He's trying to nationalize morality." Marcus stood tall. "I'm not trying to legislate morality," he said during his opening remarks. "I'm trying to codify dignity." The next 2 hours were electric. He showed live demonstrations of how legacy airline systems filtered passengers through racial and economic proxies. He presented a simulation where a fictional black woman named Aisha, a gold member, was consistently downgraded behind newer white flyers with no status. He then revealed the algorithm code itself, left unchanged since 2009. "You built inequality into the math," he told the room, and then blamed the outcome on coincidence. The committee went silent. When it ended, 5 senators requested copies of the full report. 2 others stormed out. Progress had begun. Back at Phoenix HQ, the fight wasn't just legal, it was philosophical. Neha, head of AI ethics, approached Marcus with a concern. "We're expanding fast," she said. "Asia Pacific, Europe, South America, but we're still exporting American definitions of equality. That's tricky." Marcus nodded. "Then let's fix that before it becomes imperialism." They convened the Global Equity Consortium, bringing together 40 experts across race, gender, language, and mobility justice from 18 countries. the mission redesigned Phoenix's internal algorithms to reflect contextual equity, not just diversity optics. 6 weeks later, they launched Equifly 2.0's the industry's first adaptive fairness engine for passenger experience. No more one-size-fits-all equality. This was context-aware dignity. But just as Phoenix soared to global heights, tragedy struck. An independent regional carrier in South Africa, Skylink, experienced a systems failure that led to the mistreatment of an elder Khoisan tribal leader. The footage was brutal. The elder, barefoot and soft-spoken, was denied boarding for appearing non-standard. Marcus saw the video at midnight. By 6 a.m., he was in Johannesburg, not for a PR stunt, for justice. He met with the elder's family, who had no idea who he was. "I'm not here as a CEO," he told them. "I'm here as someone who once sat where you are, watching someone you love be treated like less." They nodded quietly. He stayed the entire day. And when asked by local press what Phoenix would do next, he didn't mention systems or lawsuits. He said, "We're here to restore what was stolen respect." A week later, Phoenix announced its boldest move, yet a global dignity audit for all partner airlines. Any carrier that failed would lose access to Phoenix's booking platform, predictive safety software, and data infrastructure. Many called it business suicide. But Marcus didn't flinch. Power without principle is just noise. He told his board. 3 major airlines failed the first audit. 2 immediately partnered to reform. The third refused, and within 48 hours, bookings dropped by 29%. Meanwhile, Marcus received an invitation to deliver the keynote address at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The theme that year, Power Reimagined. As he walked onto the frosted stage overlooking the Swiss Alps, he held up his original first-class boarding pass, the one he'd been denied 2 years ago. "This," he said, "isn't a symbol of victimhood. It's a blueprint." He paused. "They handed me this and tried to bury me with humiliation. I used it to build a ladder, and now I'm handing it back so no one else needs to climb alone." Standing ovation. He didn't smile. He simply nodded. In the months that followed, Phoenix became the model for corporate transformation worldwide. Banks adapted equal skies principles to customer service. Universities rebuilt admissions algorithms using Equifly tools. Even the American Bar Association cited Phoenix's policy templates in its new ethical framework for civil rights litigation. Marcus's vision wasn't just working, it was spreading. But with success came fatigue. His calendar overflowed. His sleep vanished. His daughter, Simone, texted one evening, "When's our next movie night?" Marcus stared at the message. He replied, "Tomorrow. No cancellations. No excuses." And he meant it, because rewriting the rules meant living by them, even when the cameras turned off, even when the world wasn't watching. Back in Seattle, Marcus gathered his senior team for one final push. "Next week," he told them, "we present the Global Passenger Rights Act before the UN Human Rights Council. We're not just flying better anymore. We're building better humanity." Geneva, Switzerland. A polished marble hall in the United Nations headquarters glowed under morning light. Delegates from over 90 countries filed in. Translators adjusting earpieces. Dignitaries flipping through packets labeled Global Passenger Rights Act, sponsored by Phoenix Air. At the center of it all sat Marcus Reynolds, no longer just a CEO, no longer just a reformer, now a global standard-bearer for dignity. This wasn't about airlines anymore. This was about what it meant to move freely, without fear, bias, or humiliation anywhere on Earth. The room fell silent as the chair called him forward. Marcus approached the podium slowly, holding a worn leather wallet. "My mother gave me this," he began. "Right after I graduated MIT. Inside it, she tucked a note." He unfolded the weathered slip of paper and read aloud. "Go where they said you didn't belong. And when you get there, hold the door." He looked out at the chamber. "I'm here because someone tried to slam that door. And instead of breaking it down with anger, I bought the building, rewrote the blueprints, and hired a new architect. Laughter, applause, tears, and then silence again. The kind that comes before votes that change history. Unanimous approval. All 90 nations signed on to the first global commitment to protect passengers from discriminatory profiling, dignity violations, and algorithmic injustice in public transportation." Marcus didn't cheer. He turned to his team and simply whispered, "Now we build the framework, because one victory meant nothing without enforcement." Meanwhile, in the U.S., Phoenix Air prepared for its next milestone, the opening of the Dignity Academy. Built on a repurposed airfield in Atlanta, the sprawling complex would train global airline professionals from check-in clerks to C-suite executives in ethics-based service models. It wasn't mandatory, but it quickly became irresistible. Within weeks of opening, 43 airlines applied for certification. Why? Because customers now asked the same question when buying tickets. Are they Phoenix Dignity certified? And for airlines still lagging behind, that question cost them the night before the Academy's ribbon cutting. Marcus sat alone in his old garage, the birthplace of Phoenix Technologies. The walls were still scuffed from his first server racks, the floor still stained with oil from his mother's old car. He ran a hand across the workbench. It had all started here. Code, coffee, hope. And now, somewhere in the sky, a young woman would board a plane and not worry about her accent, her clothes, or her last name. That was the real measure. Not revenue, not headlines. Freedom, without friction. On opening day, Simone gave the keynote. Her voice trembled, but her message didn't. "My father taught me that dignity isn't a policy," she said. "It's a promise. It's what you owe the stranger next to you on every flight, bus, and train. It's what you carry when no one's watching." And then she paused. His generation built the tools. Mine will build the culture. Standing ovation. Even Marcus couldn't hold back a tear. Across the world, the Phoenix Air Standard became the blueprint for justice-integrated enterprise. Tech companies rewrote HR algorithms. Ride-sharing platforms adopted new protocols. Even the maritime shipping industry launched its own equity certification. It wasn't just woke, it was winning. Customers trusted companies that respected them. Investors followed. Profits climbed. And the narrative finally changed. Doing good was no longer a liability. It was a competitive advantage. But not everyone celebrated. At a private country club in Virginia, a group of legacy airline executives convened under the radar. They called it the Founders Roundtable. Their agenda counteracting moralized market disruption. They passed around slideshows of Phoenix Air's progress and scoffed. "Doesn't last." One muttered, "People forget." Another sneered. But the youngest among them, a 35-year-old VP with a Stanford MBA, shook his head. "You're wrong," he said. "You don't get it. They didn't just build an airline. They built expectation." That same week, Marcus visited an airport incognito. baseball cap, no security. He watched quietly as a black teenager in a hoodie approached the check-in counter. The staff smiled, scanned his ID, and handed him a first-class upgrade. No questions, no skepticism, just service. The boy grinned as he walked off, not because he got a seat, because he didn't get a fight. Marcus smiled quietly, then turned and walked away. Later that night, he boarded a Phoenix Air flight, no fanfare, no cameras. As he took seat 2A, he noticed a family across the aisle. Immigrants. Maybe. The mother whispered to the father, eyeing their boarding passes nervously. The father asked the flight attendant, "Is this correct, first class?" The attendant nodded warmly. "Yes, sir. You're exactly where you belong." The mother looked stunned, and for the first time in who knows how long, she believed it. Marcus leaned back in his chair. This was no longer about him. It never really was. It was about the millions of people who would never know his name, but would feel his legacy every time they traveled without fear. 1 year to the day after Marcus Reynolds had been denied his rightful seat in first class, he returned to the Skies not as a passenger seeking validation, but as the architect of a transformed industry. He boarded Phoenix Air Flight 1857 from Seattle to Atlanta, the same route, the same seat 2A, only this time, the aircraft was different. The staff wore navy suits with gold phoenix crests embroidered over their hearts. A placard beside the boarding door read, "Equal skies." Guaranteed, every passenger, every time. The moment Marcus stepped on board, the air felt different, warmer, safer, unburdened. As he sat, a middle-aged flight attendant approached. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, softly. "I just wanted to say, I worked 17 years under Liberty Airlines. I stayed quiet about a lot of things." She handed him a folded note and disappeared down the aisle. Marcus opened it. It read, "Your courage gave us permission. Thank you." He tucked it into his jacket without a word, because this moment wasn't about public speeches. It was about quiet dignity finally restored. Mid-flight, a young woman in the seat across the aisle dropped her passport. Marcus picked it up and handed it to her. She froze. Her eyes widened. "You're him," she whispered. Marcus smiled politely. "Just another flyer." "No," she said. "You're the reason I fly without anxiety now. I'm a Syrian refugee. The first time I ever flew. I was detained for hours because of my name." She paused, tears welling. "This time, I got a free upgrade and a welcome." Marcus nodded gently. "You deserve that. All of us do." Back in Atlanta, a press team awaited him, cameras prepped, questions rehearsed. But Marcus waved them off. "Today isn't about press," he said. "It's about reflection." And that's what he did. He walked through the terminal where he was once escorted away in shame. The tile had changed. The staff had changed. Even the signage now carried Phoenix branding with inclusive messaging in multiple languages. But what mattered most had changed silently. The culture, that invisible, all-powerful force that determined who belonged and who didn't. Later that week, Marcus stood on a TED stage. The title of his talk, "Dignity as Infrastructure." He spoke without notes. "Most companies think of injustice as a PR risk," he said. "But injustice is an infrastructure failure. If your systems humiliate people, your systems are broken." He showed before and after footage from airports, dashboards of AI transformation, and live testimonials from employees who'd once enforced bias now building equity. Then he looked into the crowd. Don't just write better mission statements. Build better missions. A beat of silence, then thunderous applause. The final validation didn't come from politicians or publications. It came from customers. An elderly Asian man sent Marcus a letter written in perfect cursive for 40 years. I traveled with a folder of proof boarding pass, ID, receipts because I was always questioned. Now, for the first time, I fly with nothing but my ticket. Thank you for building a world where I no longer need to prove I'm allowed to exist. Marcus kept that letter on his desk, framed in gold. Then came the unexpected moment Marcus received an invitation from a small Midwestern university to deliver a commencement address. He accepted. As he stood before a sea of caps and gowns, he told the graduates, "Don't chase legacy. Chase alignment. Align your power with your principles, your money with your mission, your ambition with your humanity." He paused. Because one day, you'll board a plane, walk into a meeting, or stand in line and you'll notice someone being mistreated. And in that moment, you'll have a choice: to stay silent or to redesign the system. He looked out at the faces of the future, and I hope you choose transformation over transaction. By now, Phoenix Air had been copied by other airlines. The FAA had passed its first ever passenger rights enforcement protocol based on Marcus's blueprint, and a movement once sparked by a single act of discrimination had become a business standard. On the final day of the fiscal year, Marcus hosted a small dinner for his leadership team. No media, no headlines, just the people who made it real. They toasted with sparkling cider. "To every passenger who refused to shrink," said James. "To every employee who unlearned and rebuilt," said Alexis. And finally, Marcus raised his glass. "To every moment we were told we didn't belong, and turned that pain into purpose." They clinked glasses. The room filled with warmth, and for the first time in months, peace. Marcus stepped outside that night and stared at the stars. He thought about his mother, the food stamps, the radiator that never worked, the belief that education could rewrite destiny, and it had. But not just for him, for everyone who would never again be asked, "Are you sure you're in the right line?" This wasn't just a story of revenge. This was a story of reconstruction, a new model, a new altitude, a new standard for business, justice through architecture, fairness through design, and dignity not just promised but delivered at 35,000 feet. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.